Consider it reimbursement for raising you. That is what my mother said as she drained my bank account. I was lying in a hospital bed, paralyzed by anesthesia, watching her press my own thumb against the screen to unlock my phone. She typed in the PIN 1998 and transferred my entire $20,000 disability payout to herself. "It's done," she said, looking down at me with cold, unbothered eyes. "We needed to make the final payment on the boat, Dorothy. Stop looking at me like that. Before I tell you exactly how I made them pay back every single cent with interest, drop a comment and let me know. What's the one thing a family member has done to you that you will never, ever forgive?" I'm reading every single one. 2 days later, the hospital discharged me. My father, Gregory, didn't come up to the room to help me with my bag. He just idled at the curb, honking until a nurse wheeled me out. The ride home was silent, save for his humming along to the radio, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel like he didn't have a care in the world. When we pulled into the driveway, I expected to go to my bedroom. It was on the first floor. Accessible. Safe. But as I hobbled through the front door on my crutches, my mother blocked the hallway. "We moved your things downstairs," Sierra said, pointing to the door that led to the basement. "The basement?" I asked. "Mom, it's unfinished, it's damp, and I have a shattered leg. Savannah needs your room," she replied, her voice smooth, reasonable, the way it always was, when she was being cruel. "She's starting a podcast. She needs the natural light for her content. Besides, the basement is private. You can recover in peace without bothering anyone." I looked at the narrow, uncarpeted stairs. Every step would be a battle. But I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just tightened my grip on the crutches and began the descent. That was the moment I stopped being their daughter and started being their tenant. I'm Dorothy, 26 years old. I spent 4 years coordinating complex supply chains for the military in active combat zones. I moved millions of dollars of equipment through hostile territory without losing a crate. I solved impossible problems for a living. And now, I was sleeping on a cot next to a leaking water heater because my sister needed creative space. Lying there in the dark, listening to the furnace rattle, I thought about the math. It always came down to the math. 2 weeks ago, the surgeon told me the operation to reconstruct my knee and save my mobility would cost $12,500 out of pocket because the specialized procedure wasn't fully covered by my veterans benefits yet. I went to Gregory and Sierra. I showed them the paperwork. I didn't ask for a gift. I asked for a loan. I offered to pay interest. "We're liquidating assets right now, Dorothy," Gregory had said, looking pained. "We just don't have that kind of cash lying around. You'll have to wait." I believed him. I actually believed him. Until the day before my surgery, when I saw the paperwork on the kitchen counter. A bill of sale for a 2024 cabin cruiser. Price tag, $185,000. They named it the Golden Savannah. They didn't have $12,000 to save my leg, but they had nearly $200,000 to float my sister's ego on the lake. That night in the basement, the only light came from my phone screen. I heard a tap on the high window well. It was Thomas, my younger brother. He climbed through the window because he wasn't allowed to disturb the peace upstairs. He looked different. Lighter. It took me a second to realize why his tool belt, the one he wore like a second skin, was gone. "I heard about the money," he whispered. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a stack of cash. Wrinkled 10s, 20s, a few 50s. "It's $1,800. It's not enough for the surgery, but it'll cover your meds and physical therapy for a month." I stared at the money. "Thomas, where are your tools?" He looked away, rubbing his grease-stained hands on his jeans. "I don't need them right now. I can borrow the shop set." He was lying. A mechanic without his own tools is a laborer, not a craftsman. He had sold his livelihood years of collecting high-end wrenches and diagnostic computers just to buy me antibiotics. He stripped his own future to patch up my present. My parents bought a boat to show off to neighbors who didn't like them. My brother sold his dreams to make sure I didn't get an infection. I took the money, not because I wanted to, but because rejecting it would have dishonored the sacrifice. As Thomas climbed back out into the cold night, I looked up at the ceiling where I could hear Savannah's footsteps pacing in my old room. They thought they had buried me down here. They thought I was broken, broke, and powerless. But they forgot one thing about logistics. You don't need to be the loudest person in the room to control the supply line. You just need to know where the choke points are. And sitting there in the moldy dark, I realized I didn't just want to walk again. I wanted to own the ground they stood on. I didn't leave immediately. Leaving requires a plan, and a plan requires intelligence. If I stormed out the front door screaming, I would just be the ungrateful daughter throwing a tantrum. I needed to be something else. I needed to be a ghost. I waited until 3 a.m. The house was silent. settling into its foundation with the heavy, expensive groans of a property my parents couldn't afford to maintain. My leg throbbed. A dull, rhythmic reminder of why I was awake. But I ignored it. I slid off the cot and lowered myself to the concrete floor. I didn't need to hack my father's computer to know he was lying about his finances. I knew Gregory. He was a man of physical habits. He didn't trust the cloud. He trusted boxes he could tape shut and ignore. I crawled toward the furnace in the back corner of the basement. We used to call it the shame corner. It was where broken appliances went to die, hidden behind a false wall of old insulation. I pulled aside a stack of water-damaged cardboard boxes and found what I was looking for. 3 plastic bins, shoved deep into the shadows, overflowing with unopened mail. I clicked on my phone's flashlight and started digging. It wasn't just bad. It was catastrophic. The first letter I opened was from the IRS. Final notice of intent to levy. Gregory hadn't paid property taxes in 2 years. The next was a foreclosure warning from the bank. They were 3 months behind on the mortgage. Then came the repossession orders for the cars. And the boat. The beautiful, shiny golden Savannah. The paperwork was right there. It wasn't bought with savings. It was financed with a predatory loan that had a balloon payment due next month. That's why Sierra stole my $20,000. They weren't just greedy. They were drowning. They had stolen my lifeline to patch a hole in a sinking ship that was already halfway to the bottom. I sat there on the cold concrete, surrounded by the paper trail of their ruin, and felt a cold calm wash over me. This was leverage. This was the map to their destruction. I didn't just take pictures. I took the files. I stuffed the most damning envelopes into my backpack. The tax liens. The loan agreements. The foreclosure threats. I took their secrets. Getting up was harder than getting down. I used the furnace to pull myself upright, gritting my teeth against the spike of pain in my knee. I packed my bag with military efficiency. Clothes. Meds. The $1,800 Thomas had given me. And the evidence. I didn't leave a note. Notes are for people who want to be found or forgiven. I walked out the basement door into the cool night air. The Uber was already waiting down the street. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't mourn the childhood I was leaving behind. As the car pulled away, I watched the house disappear in the rearview mirror. They thought they had broken me. They thought I was running away to lick my wounds. They were wrong. I wasn't retreating. I was just moving to higher ground to set up the ambush. 3 months later, I sat in a coffee shop across the street from a high-rise in downtown Seattle, watching my father walk through the revolving doors. He looked thinner. The bounce in his step was gone, replaced by the jerky, nervous energy of a man juggling too many lies. He wasn't there to see me. He was there to meet the managing partner of Apex Capital. He didn't know that Apex Capital was a single-member LLC registered in Delaware, or that its sole asset was the $1,800 my brother had given me, leveraged into a line of credit I'd carefully secured. He didn't know that the managing partner was just my lawyer, paid by the hour to look expensive and bored. Gregory was desperate. The golden Savannah wasn't a status symbol anymore. It was a millstone. The balloon payment on the boat loan had hit. The IRS was circling, and he was robbing Peter to pay Paul. He needed a lifeline. I gave him a noose, disguised as a rope. Through the audio feed on my laptop, I listened to the meeting. My lawyer, smooth and predatory, laid out the offer. "It's a specialized bridge loan, Gregory," he said. "We pay off the boat note and bring the mortgage current. 0% interest for 6 months. It gives you breathing room to restructure." 0%? Gregory asked. I could hear the greed sharpening his voice. "What's the catch?" "Structure," my lawyer replied. "Apex only lends to commercial entities. To qualify, you have to transfer the title of your home and the boat into a holding LLC. We treat it as a business asset. It optimizes the tax liability. You write off the interest, depreciation, everything. It's how the big players operate." I held my breath. This was the moment. This was the trap of legal greed. You see, you don't catch a narcissist by offering them a fair deal. They're suspicious of fair. You catch them by offering them a loophole. You have to make them believe they are cheating the system. Gregory didn't look at that contract and see a risk. He saw a mirror reflecting his own perceived genius. He thought he was getting a tax haven. He thought he was outsmarting the IRS and the bank simultaneously. He believed the rules didn't apply to him because he was special. He didn't read the use of collateral section. He didn't ask why the default clauses were so specific. He just saw tax write-off and 0 interest. "I've always said the tax code is optional for people who know how to read it," Gregory chuckled. I heard the scratch of a pen. That sound was the deed to my childhood home transferring from Gregory and Sierra to Apex Holdings LLC. "Done," Gregory said, sounding triumphant. "When do the funds hit?" "By close of business," my lawyer said. Welcome to the portfolio. I watched my father exit the building 10 minutes later. He was beaming. He pulled out his phone, probably calling Sierra to tell her he'd pulled off the deal of the century. He walked with the swagger of a man who had just dodged a bullet. He didn't know he had just stepped onto a landmine. By transferring the house and boat into a commercial LLC to secure a business loan, he had legally redefined his home. It wasn't a residence anymore. It was an office. And commercial contracts have very different rules than residential mortgages. I took a sip of my cold coffee. The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for him to spring it. The contract my lawyer drafted had a poison pill buried in Clause 14, Section B. It was standard for commercial loans, but lethal for people like my parents. It stated that all collateral, the house and the boat, was strictly for business use only. Any personal use of the assets would constitute a material breach of contract, trigger immediate repayment in full, and, crucially, expose the borrower to federal tax fraud investigation. To keep the 0% interest and the tax write-offs, they had to treat their home like an office and their yacht like a corporate transport vessel. No sleeping in the master bedroom. No Sunday cruises. I knew they wouldn't last a week. They lasted 4 days. On Sunday morning, my phone buzzed with an Instagram notification. Savannah, Style is live. I opened my laptop and clicked the link. The video feed filled the screen. There they were, aboard the Golden Savannah, cruising through the Sound. The sun was shining. The music was blasting. And my sister was holding a bottle of champagne that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Celebrating the new family business venture, Savannah shouted over the wind, panning the camera to show my parents. Gregory was wearing a captain's hat, steering with one hand and holding a cigar with the other. Sierra was lounging on the white leather seats, laughing. To Apex Capital, Gregory roared, raising his glass. To partners who understand vision. I hit the record button on my screen capture software. They weren't just breaking a contract. They were documenting a federal crime. By partying on a boat registered solely for commercial logistics, they were defrauding the IRS. By sleeping in a house registered as a corporate headquarters, which I knew they were doing because I could see their cars in the driveway via the security cameras I still had access to, they were violating the mortgage covenants. I watched them toast to their own genius. I watched Savannah give a tour of the cabin, showing off the newly decorated sleeping quarters, where she planned to spend the weekend. Every second of footage was another nail in the coffin. They thought they had cheated the system. They thought they had secured a free ride. They didn't realize that Apex Capital wasn't a partner. It was a mirror, and it was about to break. I downloaded the video file. I saved it to 3 different hard drives. Then I opened the folder containing the foreclosure documents my lawyer had prepared weeks ago, just waiting for this moment. I didn't feel angry watching them celebrate. I felt the cold, mechanical satisfaction of a trap snapping shut. They had signed a document agreeing that any breach would result in an immediate cross-default, meaning I didn't have to take them to court to seize the assets. They had already voluntarily surrendered them in the event of a violation. They were trespassing on my boat. They were squatting in my office building. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer. "Did you see the stream?" I asked. "I did," he replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "Clear violation of Clause 14. Plus the tax implications. It's a slam dunk. Execute the default notice," I said. "Schedule the meeting for tomorrow morning. Tell them it's a strategy session to discuss expansion." "Understood," he said. "Do you want security on standby?" "Yes," I said. "And have the eviction notice notarized." I hung up and looked at the frozen image of my father on the screen, laughing with his cigar. He looked so happy. He looked like a man who had gotten away with everything. He had less than 24 hours left in the life he thought he owned. Monday morning. The conference room at the law firm was cold, smelling of lemon polish and expensive coffee. I sat in the high-backed leather chair at the head of the table, facing the window, watching the city wake up below. My lawyer sat to my right, a silent sentinel with a stack of documents perfectly aligned in front of him. At 9 a.m. sharp, the door opened. I didn't turn around. I listened to the heavy, confident footsteps of my father and the lighter, clicking heels of my mother. They were talking to the receptionist, their voices loud, filling the space with that particular brand of entitlement they wore like armor. "Just a formality," Gregory was saying. "We're expanding the partnership. Big things on the horizon." They sat down. I heard the rustle of coats, the scrape of chairs. "So," Gregory barked, "where's this partner of yours?" "The owner is here," my lawyer said. I turned my chair. The room fell into stunned silence. Gregory's smirk froze. Sierra stared like she'd seen a ghost. "I invited you," I said calmly. "This is a business meeting," Gregory snapped. "Get out." "I'm not here as your daughter," I said, sliding a file onto the table. "I'm Apex Capital." I bought all your debt 3 months ago. The house, the boat, every credit line. I own it. That's impossible, he sputtered. You also violated Clause 14, I said, tossing down photos of their yacht party. You live-streamed tax fraud by using corporate assets for personal use. The loans are due. Now. Sierra's voice shook. We're family. No, I said. This is a liquidation. I placed one document in front of Gregory. Voluntary surrender of assets. Sign and walk free today. Or I send everything to the IRS and the DA. He didn't hesitate. He signed. Leave the keys, I said. In the lobby, Sierra rushed me, sobbing for security's benefit, then hissed in my ear. Void the foreclosure, or you go to jail. She screamed theft. The police were already waiting. They searched my bag and found a diamond necklace I'd never seen. I was cuffed. Sierra watched, calculating. Officer, I said evenly. That isn't a button on my lapel. It's a body cam. It's been recording. My lawyer arrived with the footage. It showed Sierra planting the necklace. The cuffs came off me. They went onto her. False report. Attempted extortion. Gregory stood alone as they took her away. He waited for mercy. I walked past him. 2 weeks later, I handed Thomas a deed. I sold the assets, I said. This garage is yours now. He didn't speak. He just hugged me. Gregory and Sierra now rent a small apartment. Their assets are frozen. They keep calling. I never answer. Sometimes. Saving yourself means cutting off the rot.